Okay, apologies for the delayed start, everybody. Siobhan is on her way. In the meantime, you've got the much less interesting chair of me. My name's Johnny. I work for SME for Labour, we put on this Fleet Events conference. I hope that you'll enjoy the panel we've got coming up today, which is talking about Turkey and its place in the world right now, and perhaps where it might be under this, what we're soon to be Labour government. So we've got great panel speakers. We've got Professor Erdoğan Öztürk. We've got Simon Owens from Unite the Union. And we've got Fabian Hamilton, who is the also Shadow Middle East Minister.
No longer, I'm Shadow Minister for Peace and Development.
Shadow Minister of Peace and Development.
Turkey and Cyprus.
Which are going to include Turkey and Cyprus. So it's great double chairing there. And George Howard, who's the MP for Knowsley. Maybe would you? Also we've got Ambros Chambers, just with us, who's the MP for Enfield Southgate and the Shadow Minister for Immigration. Eddie, would you be okay to?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for private sharing with us, and I would like to thank you, Brian, for organizing this event. Actually, I mean, when I got an invitation about to talk about the Turkey's transformation, both in domestic politics and in foreign policy, I thought that 10 minutes, is it not enough? One day? No, it's not enough. So in here, I try to wrap up the main turning points and my assumptions as a scholar who has been working on Turkey and the region more than 15 years. I mean, Turkey is a complicated state. It is not only a complicated state in itself. When you scrutinize the Anatolian history, starting from the Byzantine Empire and then the Ottoman Empire and today the contemporary Turkish Republic, if one thinks that it is possible to capture the power chair alone, you are underestimating the complications and underestimating the balances, the different power relations in Turkey. Therefore, neither Conqueror Mehmet nor the Emperor Constantine and not the Recep Tayyip Erdogan is sitting in its chair alone. It is a complex of the different part of unofficial and mostly unconventional coalitions systems. So in this regard, the AKP, as most of you know, that rose as a power in 2002 as a product of the various different kind of social and the political components coalition. What was the main message of Erdogan's Justice and Development Party in 2002? Is it possible to combine the Islamic values with the contemporary liberal democracy and the market values and to distribute the freedom of thought, freedom of speech and the economic welfare to the society? This was a glorious dream for Turkey because Turkey has been under a pressure of the tutelage regime for a long while. And it worked actually. They came to power with the coalition of the liberals, leftists, like the Muslim Islamic structures and non-Muslim groups at home. But outside also they got the full support and huge support of the Western allies. But throughout the process what we saw that, first of all, AKP, firstly starting from the end of the first decade of the new millennium with the economic problems getting a little bit harder. And then Gezi protests in 2013 is another turning point. Erdogan realized that if he wants to keep his chair, he needs to be liberal, this is the first choice, or harder. And he preferred to go for the second way. And then the economic conditions in 2014 and the war between a very disputable Islamic structured Gülen movement and the AKP, very interesting and the power-based war, transformed the AKP's coalition mentality from a various way. At the very beginning, he started his way with creating a coalition with the liberals, with the leftists, but at the end of the day, particularly after 2016 coup attempt, he started to create an unconventional coalitions with Islamists, nationalists, and Euro-Asians. And this has transformed all the foreign policy dynamics and the foreign policy priorities of the Justice and Development Party, because in the AKP period, we can easily observe that the level of the cooperation, the level of the mutuality between domestic politics and the foreign policy has reached its peak point. So therefore, without understanding the domestic political dynamics, it is almost impossible to understand the the transformation of the AKP's foreign policy. In here, I just wrote a report for the German Foreign Office, and I claim that there are 4 different elements that we can understand the transformation of Turkish foreign policy, or New Turkey's new foreign policy. Militarization, overdose use of Islam, different understanding of civilization, and the ambivalence of Turkish power all around the world. When I am talking about militarization, according to the latest data published by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institution, SIPRI, in 2020, Turkey's military expenditures rise around 86% increase over a 10-year period. Today, Turkey has some drops in Iraq, in Syria, Qatar, Somalia, Libya, Bosnia-Herzegovina, in all over the North African countries, in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe, and in the continental Europe at the same time. This is quite a shocking issue for Turkey, because Turkey has positioned itself as a mid-power and trying to create a balanced game all around the world, previously the AKP regime. In here, to understand this militarization, what we can see that when Erdogan has started losing his power in domestic politics, this ontological insecurity regarding losing the power in domestic politics showed itself as the hardening the military power abroad. The second thing is that the unofficial coalition with the former military members that we call the Eurasianists in domestic politics push Erdogan to be much more aggressive, much more using its military power in foreign policy. For example, they claim that there's a blue land policy which is increasing Turkey's Maryland territories over the Mediterranean policy. The last one is that within the AKP period, particularly after 2016, with the ideology of the neo-Ottomanism, Turkey saw itself, according to Erdogan and his team, Turkey is capable to capture all the Ottoman territories while using its military power. It is not very rational when you check the Turkey's shrinking economic conditions, but they are pushing to be a military power, at least in the region. The second one is that overdose use of Islam. Particularly since 1980s, Turkey has been supplying religious services, particularly in continental Europe, but at the same time all globe. For example, in the United Kingdom, Turkey has more than 11 mosques supported, funded, and totally run by the Turkish government. But now, Turkey has been using these Islamic tools and the extraterritorial use of the Islamic institutions, such as namely the presidency of the religious affairs, Diyanet. Turkey is not only using its service power to the Muslims, to the diasporas of the Western countries, but at the same time, what we know that Turkey using this tool as a foreign policy instrument. For example, in the German Foreign Office started an investigation to the Turkey's religious instruments regarding involving the German domestic politics or creating a pro-Erdoganist propaganda among the Turkish diaspora members or the Muslim citizens of the continental Europe. This has also different backgrounds. The first one is that the war between Gülen movement and Justice and Development Party, two Islamic influential structure claiming themselves whether it was the most valuable or most true Muslim all around the world. The second thing is that after the falling of the Arab Spring or uprising, I don't know how we're going to call that, or Arab winter, the collapse of the Muslim Brotherhood idea has been another shock for the Erdogan because he openly supported Muslim Brotherhood. After the Muslim Brotherhood situation, Erdogan positioned himself as the leader of the global ummah or the new contemporary caliph in the 21st century. This is the main reason of the using to overdose Islam in foreign policy. The third one is that under Atatürk's Turkey was very much Western oriented and positioning itself in terms of civilization, creating an alliance with the Western civilization. But now, Turkey said that, no, I'm not purely member of a Western club. Instead, I am the son of the Ottoman Empire, and now, if there is a civilization, there should be an Ottoman civilization. But the question is that, which Ottoman, which is run by 6 centuries, Abdülhamit's Ottoman, or the magnificent Süleyman's Ottoman, or the establishment period of Ottoman. There is a problematic point of the Turkish civilization connotations contemporarily. For example, the Hagia Sophia decision is one of the reasons of this civilization transformation. The last point, I don't want to speak that much, I don't know, I'm not checking my right now. The other thing is that the ambivalent structure of Turkey's power position in world politics. Using military, using financial tools, that is something that we can easily describe as a hard power. But what we know that Turkey's economic conditions is not enough to support its hard power. Today, currently, 1 British pound is equivalent to the 12 Turkish liras. This is an incredibly huge number. The real inflation rate in Turkey is more than 25% currently. So, despite of these shrinking economic conditions, Turkey trying to push itself as a kind of a hard power in world politics, but at the same time, with using soft power tools, such as Islam, civilization, soap opera, so on and so forth, it has been pumping a kind of a pro-Erdoganist, pro-ambivalence Ottomanist, and at the same time an Islamist soft power tool. And the combination of these two making Turkey as a kind of an ambivalent actor in world politics. For example, in Hackney, more in northern London, you can find a very pro-Erdoganist, pro-contemporary Turkish components in the UK, but most probably some of the British citizens of the United Kingdom making very suspicious regarding Turkey's current position in world politics right now. All in all, this is the last thing that I can underline, the ambivalence power position of Turkey. In spite of every gloomy sentences that I told in here, Turkey is still a very important country. And right now, I think if we would like to talk about Turkey today, we always should consider that the cards in Turkish politics may reshuffle again, most probably soon, and then we can see a new Turkey with a huge potential. But at the same time, to understand Turkey's transformation, to understand Turkey's future, we need to understand the current transformation of Turkey, because most probably we will be witnessing a kind of a revision, a kind of a rebuilding a new Turkey image in the near future. Therefore, I talked about the current Turkey's gloomy atmosphere and the problematic points, which I call the new Turkey's new foreign policy dilemmas. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Ray, and I'm hoping you'll be able to share the full article with us as well, because those of you in the audience can't see how much he cut out of that, how much detail he's actually put into the whole thing. So there's far more to learn about that, I'm sure. Next, if we can go to Simon, who can give us kind of the trade union perspective on what's happening in Turkey, without wishing to make you duplicate what you were talking about in the next panel.
This is the trouble, isn't it? No, look, thanks very much, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak. It's really good and important that this is happening, as Professor Ozturk said as well. Look, from a trade union perspective, Turkey is a critical country. For the TUC, my own union, there's 4 countries that we prioritise at the moment in terms of solidarity work. Palestine, Colombia, Brazil and Turkey, because of the situation and what is happening there. There's a long history of trade union involvement in solidarity with Turkey, long predating the current Erdogan period, because as you all know, there were often military dictatorships, repression is part of the history. So, you know, there were links before, they were building up, but I think something fundamental has changed recently. And for the point of view of my own union, which had some of the earlier links, I think what was Well, we should perhaps first just say as well, it was visible, this more liberal air that was blowing, and European and international union federations were deliberately starting to hold congresses in Turkey because there was a view it was loosening up, it was going in the right direction, it could be an EU state, we should encourage that development. And then 2014 started with the Kobani battle. And it became very clear that Erdogan was actually backing the Islamists and was arming ISIS and supporting those very forces. And for people of a left progressive nature, you think, what the hell is going on here? So we started to issue statements and try and develop our solidarity work. In fact, on the election in 2015, the June 23rd one, we actually had a congress in Istanbul on that very day, and there was a feeling the HDP had broken through, things were going in the right direction. My God, how wrong we were, because didn't it take a bad turn? It was immediately forced into a new election, the repression intensified, we sent a delegation to Sur district in Diyarbakir in February 2016, I think it was. I've had the sad fortune to have as a trade unionist, been in Colombia, been in Palestine and everything. When I went to Sur district, I could not believe what I saw, and it was visible. The Syrian civil war is in Turkey, and it is happening, and we have to deal with the reality of that as quickly as possible. So it's deteriorated, as you all know, rapidly. We've had to do a lot more solidarity work with the Kurdish population because it is front and foremost an attack on a huge part of the Turkish population from Erdogan and the Turkish state. But it's also any progressive force, trade unionists, regularly imprisoned, jailed, sacked and everything. We then saw just recently the throwing out of the Istanbul Convention. So women on block are under massive attack. And the situation has degenerated into, I don't know how we academically want to define it, but massive authoritarianism bordering on an Islamo-fascism type state. That is how it appears to us, and that is how we are very much looking at it. We have extended the solidarity work because we saw the militarisation and the attacks in northeastern Syria, in Rojava, the ethnic cleansing, the current attacks that are going on in Iraq, and the absolutely devastating situation that a lot of people are facing there. It seems to us is expanding and getting worse. They're in Libya now, it's happening with Azerbaijan. There's talks about Turkish troops being used at Istanbul airport. And what is clear to us is that Erdogan and the regime are absolutely off the scale in terms of the repression, the authoritarianism, the almost naked support for ISIS in many cases. And we have to, as a matter of principle, as trade unionists and people of the left, stand 100% together with the forces that are opposing that. So we really need, and I think to conclude with a few critical points, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with all those people that are opposing that repression for the obvious reasons as left progressive people. We need the UK in the West to stop this nonsense and pretending that Turkey is some sort of government and state and regime that is okay and is a normal member of the community of nations. It is not. We should not be selling arms to a country like that. We should not be excusing that behaviour in any way, shape or form. We have another problem here. The military pension fund from Turkey tried to buy one of the steelworks. They're currently talking about setting up a glass company in Wales. So, we wonder what type of employer they will be here if that is the background that they are coming from as well. But we need the Labour Party to be more consistent on this. It's absolutely right that they call out human rights abuses in China or Hong Kong or Belarus. But what about the human rights abuses in Turkey? And what about the way Turkey is behaving? It needs addressing, and we need to be clearer and more consistent in those areas. And I'll finish with this as well. I happen to be also the chair of the trade union Freedom for Erdogan campaign. Whether people like it or not, there is a conflict in Turkey. It is no good to simply label it as terrorism, and therefore any method that Erdogan chooses to oppose that is okay. We know from our own painful experience on the island of Ireland that you have to get people round a table and talk together. Freedom for Erdogan is absolutely essential for that. The Turkish state may wish to deny it now, but there was a period between 2013 and 2015 when talks were taking place, when the situation was improving. There will be no, in our opinion, no proper solution in Turkey unless that root cause of some of the problems in Turkey is addressed. So we will continue to call for the freedom for Erdogan as part of a proper peace process. What the West can do, the UK government and the Labour Party should do more clearly, is say we will continue to stand with the progressive forces. We are appalled at the military inventions and the ethnic cleansing in Syria and in northern Iraq and so on, and we must pledge to redouble those efforts until we bring about a proper change. Thank you.
To everybody for my late arrival. I really don't walk as quickly as Google Maps think I do. It was when they said, you're 1 minute left, quarter of a mile, and I think, God, I really think I walked that fast. So thank you, Simon, and I know from meetings I've had attended before at conference what a real stalwart you are on this issue. And our next speaker is known to everybody, I'm sure, Fabian Hamilton.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to stand up, or am I right sitting down? Or do you want the microphone? Yeah. Okay.
I always think
I'll
standing
stand
is
up.
better.
I always prefer it. I hope you don't mind. Well, look, thank you very much, Chair. Simon, before I start, let me just say we will always stand with progressive forces. The Labour Party is about progressive forces and progressive politics, and we'll never, ever renege on that, I hope. I'm not the leader of the Labour Party yet. But good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much to CEFTUS and to SME for Labour for organising such an important discussion today. In recent months, Turkey's democracy has, as we've heard, taken a very worrying turn, with the arrest and detention of opposition lawmakers, further attacks against trade unions and the free press, and the withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention on Women's Rights. I think it's vital that the Turkish government avoids any further erosion of democratic norms and standards. And the Labour Party expects the UK government to make this clear to the Turkish government. But don't hold your breath. I think trade deals are probably more important to them than women's rights or human rights, I'm sorry to say. But Turkey is a country that is very close to my heart. I'm the former chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Turkey. I've visited the country many times. I have extended family members who live there, and indeed my great-grandparents came from the Ottoman Empire. Now, Labour's Shadow Europe Minister, Catherine West, and I have a good working relationship with the current Turkish ambassador, Ümit Yalçın, who we meet with regularly, recent months, of course, online, to discuss the issues that we're talking about today. We frequently discuss these issues with him. Now, it's clear to me that the human rights of workers in Turkey, as Simon's highlighted, have been continuously violated for several years, especially since the failed coup. I'm going to focus my remarks, though, on the freedom of the press and the persecution of journalists in the country, and how President Erdogan is looking abroad to distract the population from his domestic problems. Journalists have borne the brunt of the crackdown on freedom of expression in Turkey. After China, it is Turkey that has imprisoned the most journalists in the world. And there are currently at least 40 journalists behind bars, with Turkey ranking 157th out of 174 countries for press freedom. That is pretty worrying. I believe that the presidency of Joe Biden in the United States can present us with a new opportunity to challenge Turkey diplomatically on the persecution of journalists. While Donald Trump was reportedly very close to President Erdogan and would take his calls apparently twice a week, I'm confident that President Biden will stand up for the freedom of journalists far more robustly, or at least I certainly hope so. I think it's very welcome that this issue is being raised widely in the United States, and I think the UK could learn an awful lot from the bipartisan group of 54 US senators who signed a letter condemning the silencing of opposition voices and the jailing of journalists that are critical of the Turkish government. Now, the crackdown on journalists goes hand in hand with the crackdown on social media in the country. And the repressive social media laws that took effect last October highlight this. Turkey's internet legislation requires sites with more than 1 million daily users to appoint a local representative by next month, in fact, to enforce court orders to remove content. Global platforms must also store their user data within Turkey itself, which expands the Turkish government's surveillance of its own citizens. And the rules impose heavy fines, ad bans, a squeeze on bandwidth if social media companies fail to meet those deadlines. The fact that any content that the Turkish government deems offensive must be removed within 48 hours severely restricts journalists that are independent of the state media, again with huge fines for non-compliance, making it almost impossible to rebel. Now, no government in the world removes as much content, not even from Twitter, not even China actually, as the Turkish government does, with over 6,000 requests in 2019 alone. I think the public should be able to freely criticise its own government, especially when it comes to decisions that are literally about life and death. The arrest of hundreds of people who criticised the Turkish military actions in Syria and Libya, for example, on social media, just shows how seriously the Turkish government takes any public content that may damage its reputation and what it's trying to do. Turkey also had a complete ban on Wikipedia, but after pressure from activists and trade unions alike, the Supreme Court lifted that ban in January this year, thank goodness. But this shows that campaigns for freedom of speech, expression and information do work. And the Turkish government can be moved on its position. It's so important that the UK government gets behind activists to push Turkey further on these issues. And we in the Labour Party certainly do get behind those activists. But I think this isn't just happening on the internet and on social media. It's happening on the streets too, as we've heard and as we know. I was shocked to see the reports earlier this year of at least 5 journalists who were targeted by police while covering student protests against the arrest of 2 Bogazici students over an artwork in an exhibition on the school campus that was deemed to be offensive, apparently. The police's use of tear gas and rubber bullets on protesters and journalists covering the intervention was completely unacceptable. And I think it was particularly disturbing that the police detained Elif Akgül, a board member of the Confederation of Progressive Trade Unions of Turkey. And I'm sure Simon knows a lot more about that than I do. This is just one example where the Turkish police and security forces have arrested journalists taking part in peaceful protests on the streets. Disturbingly, this crackdown doesn't just extend to journalists, with over 36,000 people, including more than 300 children, being investigated for apparently insulting President Erdogan in 2019 alone. This has clear and very worrying consequences for the future of free speech and collective action in Turkey. Now, Labour will be holding the Turkish government to account on this, but also to make sure, we'll be making sure that the UK government makes use of our excellent diplomatic corps and diplomats to do as much as possible to uphold these basic freedoms. As an internationalist party, I think it's so important that we work collectively to further the freedoms that are under attack right now in Turkey. However, through this subversion of Turkish democracy, I believe President Erdogan has isolated himself abroad as well. For example, in Cyprus, where the country remains in an unofficial two-state scenario, he's perpetually violated international law by resettling the resort of Verona and has dialed up the rhetoric on a so-called two-state solution, which we certainly don't believe in. Firstly, both the European Union and the United Nations have made it clear that the proposed two-state solution in Cyprus is a non-starter and will never be acceptable. Second, by putting Turkey at odds with the existing UN resolutions and international law itself, President Erdogan has damaged Turkey's reputation on the world stage, as well as its relationship with the UK. But it's important that the UK government makes that explicitly clear to President Erdogan. Turkey's drilling in the Republic of Cyprus's exclusive economic zone and the clear provocations in Varosha cannot be allowed to continue. If talks on Cyprus are ever to succeed, it's vital the Turkish government must also end its military presence on the island of Cyprus in full over a period of time, a phased withdrawal. The UK's considerable influence in Turkey and the region as a whole makes it even more vital that we take that opportunity to make this clear to the Turkish government. Finally, Chair, as his approval ratings slump in the opinion polls, these actions will only become more desperate, I believe, and more volatile. Whilst a Labour government would seek to work with Turkey where there is common ground, it's absolutely vital that, where rights and freedoms are impinged at home and abroad, the United Kingdom steps up and makes clear its opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. Clearly a very well appreciated speech, and certainly I learned a great deal from what you said, and thank you very much for your contribution. Our next speaker is Bambos Charalambos, the man with the loveliest name in the Parliamentary Labour Party.
Well, Fangam Debonair.
She's close second. Bambos.
Thanks, Siobhan. And annoyingly, being the fourth speaker, much of what I was going to say has been said already, but there are some things that I will wish to cover. But as we've heard, if you look at Turkey in the geopolitics of the area, Turkey has alienated a significant number of its neighbours. It's alienated Egypt, it's alienated Libya, because it's backed the wrong sides in those struggles there. It's obviously at odds with Israel, and it still has disputes with Greece. And this has left Turkey with very few places to go, and it's also compromising itself. And what we're seeing is that Turkey is, we've seen Turkey do a deal with China, an energy deal, and all of a sudden the opposition against the Uyghurs has been silenced because of the deal it's done with China in relation to energy. So it's compromised itself in that one. And I think one thing we need to look at is where Turkey is being pushed to, because if they've got nowhere to go, then they will inevitably put pressure on where they think they're the weakest spots in that area. So obviously we've heard about Cyprus, so Turkey feels it can flex its muscles about Cyprus. There were some elections last year in the north of Cyprus. In those elections, Turkey was found to have meddled in the outcome of those elections, which resulted in a pro-Erdogan candidate being elected, which has also led to this call for a partition from the north in Cyprus, which is not what's wanted and is not what the UN will agree to, but that's something Turkey is pushing on. Also the issue of refugees. Turkey has taken a significant number of refugees from Syria, and those refugees are in camps in Turkey. Turkey, I think, has taken about 4 million refugees, around that number, and Turkey wants to try and make that Europe's problem, which Europe does need to take its fair share as well, but that's also another pressure point that Turkey will seek to put pressure on. So how those are dealt with need to be taken into account. What's the UK's response? The UK has been keen to do as many trade deals post-Brexit as possible. They're trying to ignore any human rights abuses in the people they do trade deals, because they see it as a box-ticking exercise. You'd have seen the recent trade deal the UK did with Australia, where they didn't even try too hard to do a trade deal that outlaws the Turkey's use, doesn't ban Australia's use of fossil fuels. So that's the example of how the UK is willing to turn a blind eye, even though it's meant to be hosting COP26 in a few weeks' time. They're just willing to look to one side and ignore that. So the UK's situations, they're desperate post-Brexit to do trade deals with whoever, which is why they did a deal with Turkey, didn't look at human rights abuse, didn't mention it at all, and were willing just to proceed as they want to. We need to make sure the UK government and all the governments around Europe, we've heard about Biden and the USA, are on board with this, because we can't allow a country the size of Turkey to be able to get away with human rights abuses. We've heard about the locking up of journalists, also there's the exiling of HDP politicians, obviously the ongoing situation with Abdullah Öcalan as well being in prison. These are issues that the internationally need to be taken into account, and need to be, greater pressure needs to be put on Turkey to resolve these issues, and not enough is being done. Turkey's dispute with Cyprus in relation to the drilling in the Mediterranean is also an issue. That's brought to the attention of France. France is doing some joint manoeuvres in the Mediterranean with Cyprus. This is also to basically give a message to Turkey that your intolerance about flouting international maritime law will not be allowed, and that's a good message to be sent to Turkey. But we need greater emphasis on that, and I think the international community needs to step up and not allow Turkey to get away with these abuses. I think Erdogan is desperate, his popularity is pumping as we've heard, and I think he is in trouble, but we need to keep the pressure on to make sure that human rights are respected everywhere, and we don't turn a blind eye to Turkey. And I think that, I know that together the international community, with Biden in the White House, with greater pressure around Europe, and obviously the elections in Germany tomorrow will be absolutely crucial, then we will see what the outcome is. But I'm quite optimistic that Erdogan won't be in power for too much longer, but we need to all put the pressure on to make sure that that happens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bambos, and bringing more to, widening it, including more countries such as France and the European perspective. Our final speaker, last but not least, my very dear friend George Howarth.
Thank you, Siobhan. I first add my congratulations to Cyprus for organising this event. It is both timely and important. And also thanks to the other speakers for the enlightening contributions, like Siobhan, I've learned so much from. Just as a general point about Turkey, I've always admired the idea of a secular modern state, which was the vision of Kemal Atatürk. And it includes a lot of things that we've already talked about, important issues that need to be at the heart of any modern state. And I've also, always felt that over the years, mostly UK-Turkish relations have on the whole been good. We have alliances, the involvement in NATO and other alliances that we're all involved in has been healthy and constructive and important. But we're now really at a crossroads. When I wrote those words, I thought someone else is bound to have said that. I actually didn't so far. But I'm serious about it. It's not just a cliche. And it's democracy and constitution are now not as in its right shape that they should be. And we've heard various examples of that. Now, I want to be honest with you. As a UK MP, I don't think it's appropriate for me to tell the people of Turkey what to do. But I do feel that I can offer a few general principles that we in the United Kingdom should support in relation to Turkey. The first one is, and this may be controversial with some people, I don't know, but elected presidential systems, unless they have accepted and honoured term limits, can have a problematic consequence. Long-standing, I mean, this is not unique to Turkey, it happens all over the world with some presidential systems. Presidents come to believe that their own interests are also the same interests as the national interest. And what we've heard so far today is increasingly with President Erdogan, that is what is now taking place. The second principle is that stable democracies have to value the rule of law. That is the principle that everybody is equal before the law in any democratic state. And yet what we see again in Turkey is that some people are considered to be above the law, not just those in the political system directly, but those who are in some way protected by people in the political system. And, that is not the sort of principle that can be tolerated for very long. We've already heard, and I won't labour the point, about freedom of speech. But there's also freedom of assembly, and that includes the right to form and support trade unions, freedom of religion, freedom of dissent. And those have to be respected, not just in words, because words can be cast aside easily, but it has to be they have to be respected in the way that the state functions. And that freedom, as we've also heard, must also apply to the media, whether it's conventional, traditional media or the social media. Publications, journalists, academics should not live in fear of expressing criticisms of the government and the ongoing political situation. And those freedoms have to be respected by the Erdogan regime, and yet they are not being done, they are not at the moment. So the evidence before us is that on that count we're also not behaving in a manner consistent with a democratic state. And again, we've already heard about human rights, proper human rights. They have to be upheld, again, not just in words, but both for individuals and for distinct ethnic groups and other groups in society. And this is not a principle that President Erdogan seems to hold dear. He sees difference as something to be exploited. He doesn't see difference as a point at which you can start to bring people together in mutual respect. And I just want to say a word about the Kurds. I have a long-standing commitment and friendship with the Kurdish people, not just in Turkey but elsewhere. And it all began with my friend and former colleague, Anne Fluid. Anne had a long-standing, before the Iraq war, had a strong relationship with the Kurdish people in northern Iraq. And she supported their cause when she was almost a lone voice, not just in Parliament, but in the whole of the United Kingdom. And I was very fortunate to go on a visit to Iraq with her. And I found just how important the Kurdish people were post the invasion of Iraq. They provided liberal values, they provided moderation, where there were extreme groups jockeying for position. And they had been an absolute important group to help bring stability to Iraq. Now, of course, the Kurdish people don't just exist in Iraq. They exist across several countries, Turkey being an important one of them. And yet, how does Erdogan view groups like the Kurds? Well, in some cases, he'd like us to believe that they're all terrorists. He bandies those words about with abandon. And, you know, just a word about respect. I've already mentioned it, but it's important in this context. You cannot have a stable society when different groups are singled out for criticism, not from doing anything wrong, but because they happen to be a bit different in the way they approach politics, the way they see themselves. Now, these trends, as we've heard, are having an effect on Erdogan's support. Polling evidence shows it to be in decline, markedly so amongst young people. And it's now a distinct and growing possibility that the country's direction, if the people are to be listened to, needs to change. And those principles I've just talked about, and other issues like trade union freedom that Simon talked about, need to be taken into account in that road forward. So what is the road forward for Turkey, and how do we bring about the changes that the people of Turkey rightly expect to see? First of all, and this is my advice as a UK MP who has no particular personal skin in the game in Turkey. The first thing is, opposition groups, they all have distinct things to say. But if he is going to be toppled, and that seems to me on the polling evidence as what the people of Turkey want to see, then they have to coalesce in the next presidential election around a single candidate. They might not agree with everything that candidate stands for, but they need to understand that you cannot fight an incumbent by being divided as an opposition. The second thing, and the way they should judge that candidate, or those candidates, is whether or not they're willing to consider putting to the people the possibility of reverting to a parliamentary democracy system rather than a presidential system, because, as I already said, presidential systems have certainly with long-standing presidents, unfortunate consequences. So, the final point I wanted to make is that those, if you go on the future, the immediate future of the presidency, if the people of Turkey want to retain a presidential system, then such things as term limits have to be inviolable, not something that could be negotiated away for the convenience of the incumbent. And I hope that they can coalesce around somebody who looks to the national interest and not their own specific interest. What we need is to commit to tolerance, of respect, and the freedom of speech, assembly, religion, dissent, without fear of being targeted by an intolerant state. Those three guarantees are, in my view, have to be Turkey's principles on which they move forward. And they need to move forward in recovering Turkey's reputation and practice as a secular and modern state. I wish them well, and I pledge personally, as a Member of Parliament in the UK, to give and lend what support I can to those principles and that way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. much, George. I am sorry to everybody here, but we won't be able to take questions and comments because there is such a jam-packed schedule in this room that following on very succinctly from George's contribution, the next meeting is going to be on self-determination, freedom and democracy in Kurdistan. Can I thank everybody for their attendance? Can I thank Cyprus for organising this meeting? Can I thank SME for Labour and definitely Ibrahim for the extensive topics that will be discussed in this room over the next few days. I am sure that I will meet everybody in this room at another meeting to be held in the Gloucester room. Have a lovely conference.